"We are gathered here," the officiant said, "to join Kang Du-hyun and Amara Blackwood." A door at the side of the room creaked open. A little girl in a purple coat walked in, dragging a stuffed rabbit by one ear. She looked at all the flowers, all the strangers, then found the man standing at the front and broke into a run. Head in that room turned at once. Du-hyun's men at the exits went rigid. Du-hyun himself turned around, and for one full second, the composure of a man who had survived 3 assassination attempts without blinking simply broke apart. Amara didn't scream. She didn't cry. She stood there in her wedding dress and watched a strange toddler wrap both arms around her fiancé's leg, and her jaw set hard. Du-hyun. Her voice came out low, level, and completely in control. "You have 1 sentence to explain this. Then I walk back down this aisle alone." "I have never seen this child in my life." His voice cracked on it. "I swear to you, that's 2 sentences. Amara didn't blink, and I still don't believe either of them. The little girl looked up at Amara, unbothered, still hugging Du-hyun's leg. "Are you Daddy's other friend?" Nobody answered her. A woman near the back row stood halfway out of her seat, hand pressed to her mouth. Somebody's champagne glass tipped and shattered against the floor. "Somebody hold the doors," Du-hyun said. Not loud, the voice of a man used to being obeyed without raising it. "No," Amara said. "Nobody's locking anybody in or out until I get an answer that isn't a denial. Queens, before this story goes 1 step further, I'm so glad you found this channel, whether you've been here since episode 1 or you just discovered us tonight. Tell me where you're watching this from, because I want to know exactly who's sitting with me for this one. And if you haven't yet, hit subscribe right now, not because a channel needs a number, but because what happens in the next 20 minutes is going to need somewhere to land, and I want you here when it does. Drop a comment with 1 word. What do you think that little girl actually knows that nobody else in that room does yet? 3 months before that wedding, Amara Blackwood had opened her 2nd restaurant. She hadn't come from money. She'd come from a mother who cleaned office buildings at 4 in the morning and a will that never bent for anybody. That's exactly why she noticed the man in the corner booth who ordered the same dish 4 nights running just to talk to her for 5 minutes each time. "Not subtle," she told him the 4th night, arms crossed. "I'm usually very subtle." Du-hyun almost smiled. "You're just harder to impress than most people. People are scared of you." She didn't move. "I'm not most people." He never tried to talk her out of being exactly who she was. That was what pulled her in. His father, Kang Yong-soo, never once mentioned a twin brother in 3 years of family dinners. When Amara had asked, gently, the way you'd ask about a grave, Yong-soo had simply said, "Some sons bring honor, others bring shame. We don't speak of the second kind," and poured himself another drink. She let it go. She had no idea a toddler was about to prove exactly how much shame Yong-soo had buried alive, and that it had nothing to do with dishonor at all. Back in the kitchen, a caterer named Deja Coleman dropped a serving tray so hard it shattered against the marble floor. She'd seen the groom's photo on the welcome board 15 minutes earlier. The jaw, the tattoo climbing his neck, the exact shape of his mouth. 3 years ago, Deja had loved a man named Jae-hoon. Same tattoo, inked the week they met, because he wanted something on his skin that was his choice and nobody else's. Jae-hoon, who vanished the month she told him she was pregnant. Jae-hoon, who the world had been told was executed in a war that officially never happened. She was already running before she finished the thought. "What's your name, little one?" Du-hyun asked, kneeling slowly, his voice gentler than any of his men had ever heard it. "Zuri." She said it like this was a completely normal conversation to have in front of 200 guests. "You look like Daddy. Mommy has a picture." "Picture?" "The one in the box under her bed. She thinks I don't know." Deja burst through the side doors, scooping Zuri into her arms. "I am so sorry, Zuri, baby. You cannot just run off like that." Du-hyun looked at her. Something in his chest went tight. "Do I know you?" "No, too fast, too sharp. We've never met." Amara heard the crack in that word. She'd spent a decade reading people who lied to her about invoices. She knew a lie the second it left someone's mouth. Both lying. She stepped down off the altar, ivory silk dragging across marble. "And I am not marrying into this family until somebody tells me what this child knows that I don't." Yong-soo rose from the front row, face gone the color of ash. "This is a family matter. Little girl just called your son Daddy in front of 200 people." Amara's voice rang clear across the frozen room. "It concerns everybody in this building. Somebody talk. Now." Zuri, bored of the tension, reached up and tugged at Du-hyun's tie. "Is this a party?" They moved into a side study, dark wood shelves, a cold fireplace, the kind of room where decisions got made that ended careers, sometimes lives. Everyone out except family, Yangsu said. The bride. Amara didn't move. I'm staying. So am I, Deja held Zuri tighter. She's my daughter. I decide who talks about her, not you. Du-Hyeon knelt in front of Zuri, who was busy examining a crystal paperweight like it was the most interesting object in the building. Can you tell me about the picture your mommy has? Under the bed. There's a man and mommy laughing. He has your face. Amara's eyes cut to Deja. Who is he? Deja looked at Yangsu first. That look, loaded with 3 years of fear, told Amara everything before a single word came out. His name was Jae-hoon. Fireplace, cold and unlit, still somehow seemed to hold its breath. My brother is dead. Du-Hyeon's voice had gone flat. Killed by the Osaka faction 3 years ago. That's the story you were told. Deja's chin didn't drop. That's the story your father wanted told. Yangsu's hand slammed his own desk. That is enough. Amara stepped fully between the two men. Talk, right now, and it better not be a lie because I will find out. Yangsu sat down heavily. For the first time in his son's life, he looked less like a boss and more like a tired old man. Because, he said, Jae-hoon isn't dead. Queens, I need you standing with me for a second, because what Amara does next is going to split this comment section straight down the middle. She just heard the man she's about to marry has been lied to by his entire family for 3 years, and instead of walking out that door, she plants her feet in that room and demands the whole truth, right there. In front of a man who has buried people for less. Tell me in the comments, is that brave or is that reckless? And if you're feeling this in your chest the way I am, hit that like button right now, not for me, for her, for every woman who has ever refused to look away from a lie just because it was easier. Du-Hyeon made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Say that again. Brother is alive. Yangsu's hands trembled. He's been alive this entire time. Where is he? Overseas. In hiding. Protection, I arranged myself. Protection from what? A captain in our own organization tried to frame him for skimming from the Osaka deal. A lie meant to eliminate him and clear a path to take his place. I only learned the truth after I'd already told the Osaka faction he was executed for it. It was the only way to keep the peace treaty alive. Jae-hoon agreed to disappear. It saved this family. You let your own son vanish, Amara said, to protect a business deal. Protected this family. Yangsu's voice rose. Do you understand what a war would have cost? Not just money, lives. I made a choice no father should have to make. You protected yourself. Deja's voice cracked wide open. 2 weeks after Jae-hoon disappeared, you found out about me. You came to my apartment with money and men behind you and told me if I ever said his name near this family again, I'd disappear too. I was 23. I took the money. I moved. I told myself I was protecting my daughter from people who clearly didn't want her. Zuri hummed to her stuffed rabbit, unaware she was the reason 3 years of buried secrets had just cracked wide open. You let me grieve my own brother, Du-Hyeon said, his voice breaking on the word brother. For 3 years. You let this child believe her father was murdered, and you were going to let me marry without ever telling me any of it. It wasn't your business to know. It's my business now. Amara's voice didn't rise. Because your granddaughter just called my fiancé Daddy in front of every guest I invited. Somebody better start being honest, or I walk out that door and take every question I have straight to a reporter who owes me a favor. Yang, Sue's face drained another shade paler. Zuri had fallen asleep against Deja's shoulder by the time the shouting settled into something quieter. Amara sat across from Du-Hyeon, studying his face the way she studied a supplier who'd lied about an invoice. Need the truth, right now, in front of your father. Anything. You know, any part of you did you suspect he was lying? Du-Hyeon was quiet a long moment. No funeral, no body. My father wouldn't let me near the investigation. I told myself it was grief. I wanted to believe that. The alternative was that my own father would erase my brother to save a deal, and I didn't want to live in a family capable of that. Amara held his gaze. Okay. I believe you didn't know. She stood, smoothing a dress she wasn't sure she'd wear again that day. But understand something about me before this goes one step further. I didn't build my whole life from nothing just to marry into a family that erases people the second they're inconvenient. If I stay, it's because you prove you're not your father, not with a ring, with what you do in the next hour. What do you need me to do? Get in a car. Amara looked at Deja. We're finding your brother right now and she's coming with us. A nod at Zuri. This family has locked enough people out of rooms they belonged in. Not today. Youngsu tried weakly to slow it down. Amara shut it down in seconds. Had 3 years to manage this story, she told him, fastening a seatbelt in a wedding dress on a jet none of them planned to board that day. Today, you don't manage anything. Today, a little girl gets her father back. Deja sat across the aisle, Zuri asleep in her lap, her whole body finally starting to loosen. You didn't have to come, Du-hyun said quietly. Yes, I did. Deja didn't look at him. I've spent 3 years being told my daughter's father was dead by a family with the power to make that lie feel like truth. I'm not staying in a room while someone else decides what happens next. Amara caught her eye across the aisle. A small, steady nod. One woman recognizing another who refused to shrink. The jet touched down 11 hours later, the sky just turning orange. A car carried them along a cliffside road to a modest house, where a man stood in the doorway, drawn by the sound of tires on gravel, his face freezing the instant he saw who'd stepped out. Du-hyun, his voice cracked. You're not supposed to be here, Father said. Father said a lot of things. Du-hyun walked toward his twin brother for the first time in 3 years. Most of them were lies. Jae-hoon's eyes moved past his brother, to Deja frozen by the car, then down to the small girl stirring awake in her mother's arms. He made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Zuri. He said her name like he'd rehearsed it silently for 3 years and never believed he'd actually get to say it out loud. While the brothers stood 20 feet apart, neither one willing to close the distance first, Amara pulled Deja aside near the porch steps. None of this is your fault, Amara said. Not one piece. You don't know that. I took the money. I could have fought a crime family with lawyers and men behind every door. You were 23 with a baby coming and a family who'd already proven they could make people disappear. You didn't fail her. You kept her safe the only way you had power to. I told myself I'd tell her the truth when she got older. I told myself that made it okay. Doesn't have to be perfect to be survival. Amara watched the brothers finally close the distance, gripping each other's shoulders, both crying without a shred of shame. There's a difference between protecting someone and surviving long enough to protect them later. From where you were standing, they probably looked exactly the same. Never meant for her to walk into your wedding, Deja said. I didn't even know Du-hyun existed until I saw his photo this morning. I almost packed up and left. If you had, Amara said, I'd have married into a family today without ever knowing his father erased his own son to protect a business deal. She looked back at the porch. Zuri didn't ruin my wedding. She saved it. She just had no idea that's what she was doing. It took Jae-hoon a long while to find his voice, sitting on the porch steps beside his brother, staring at the water. I remember the day I supposedly died. Father came to see me 2 nights before the Osaka faction was told I'd been executed. Told me the story we were going to sell them. I fought him at first. Then he explained what would happen to the whole organization, to you, if the peace deal collapsed because some captain invented a lie to steal my place. I agreed to disappear. You have a daughter, Du-hyun said. Did you know? Hoon's throat worked. Not until this exact moment, if I had known Deja was pregnant, nothing would have kept me from her. He must have found out after I was already gone. He never told me. 3 years and 30 miles from where I was hiding, my daughter was growing up. He's going to answer for it. What good does that do now? It doesn't give me 3 years back. Du-hyun's jaw tightened. But it means nobody else in this family gets erased quietly again, not while I hold power. Jae-hoon looked over at Zuri, wide awake now, studying the stranger who shared her father's exact face. She called you Daddy at the wedding. She saw your photograph. We have the same face. She wasn't wrong to be confused. Du-hyun's voice caught. She was looking for you the whole time. She just found me first by accident. Queens, I have to ask you something before we finish this one out because I don't think there's a clean answer here. Jae-hoon just found out he has a daughter he never got to raise, all because his own father decided 3 years of silence was worth the cost. What would you have done in his place? Fought harder to come home the second you found out, or understood exactly why fear kept him frozen where he was? Comment below with your answer, because I read every single one, and this is the kind of question I want us sitting with tonight. 2 days later, back at the estate, the wedding decorations still stood untouched, flowers wilting in their vases. The aisle runner rolled out like a held breath nobody had exhaled yet. Amara sat on the terrace steps, her engagement ring suddenly heavier than it had been a week earlier. Du-hyun found her there as the sun went down. Understand if you walk away from all of this. She turned to look at him, steady, unshaken. Your father let you grieve a brother who was alive for 3 years. He threatened a young mother into silence and erased his own granddaughter to protect a business truce. That's not small. I don't get to love my way past that. I know. Here's what I watched you do. Her voice softened just slightly. The second you learned the truth, you didn't protect the lie. You got on a plane within the hour to find your brother. You didn't hesitate once. He's my brother. Exactly my point. She almost smiled. You're not your father. You proved that today in the worst possible way, in front of 200 witnesses and a very confused string quartet. Du-hyun almost laughed despite everything. I still want to marry you, Amara said. But not today. Not like this, with your father still trying to manage how this story gets told. I want a wedding where Jae-hoon stands beside you as your best man, where Zuri is old enough to actually understand who her father is when she walks that aisle. And I want your father to answer publicly to Deja, to Zuri, to me, for what 3 years of silence cost this family. That could take time. Things usually do, Amara said, taking his hand. 8 months later, the wedding happened again, smaller, on that same cliffside coastline where Jae-hoon had spent 3 years in hiding, with 100 guests instead of 200, and no men stationed at the exits. Because Du-hyun had made a decision his father never had the courage to make. A family that hides behind fear isn't a family worth protecting. Jae-hoon stood beside his brother as best man, steadier now, his relationship with Deja rebuilding on her terms, not the whirlwind it had once been, but something patient, built on hard truth instead of easy silence. Zuri walked the aisle as flower girl, scattering petals with the same fearless confidence that had once sent her sprinting toward a stranger and calling him daddy. This time, when she looked for her father, she looked in exactly the right direction. Yongsoo sat in the back row. Not because he wasn't invited, Du-hyun had insisted, but because he'd asked for that seat himself. He'd stepped back from full control of the organization months earlier, after Amara made it a condition of the wedding. Not a quiet payoff for Deja and Zuri, but a public, documented acknowledgement that Jae-hoon had been alive the entire time, and had been failed by his own family more than he'd ever failed them. Do you forgive him? Amara asked quietly that morning, watching Yongsoo sit alone by the cliffside railing. I understand him better than I want to, Du-hyun said. He was so afraid of losing everything he'd built that he became willing to lose everyone in the process. I won't become a man like that. So I let him stay, at a careful distance, because cutting him off completely would just repeat his own lesson, erasing someone because it's easier than facing what they did. That's a kind of forgiveness. Maybe. Or maybe it's just refusing to keep the family habit of hiding people alive. When the vows began again, Amara looked out at the small, honest gathering, no strangers pretending to be impressed, no cameras hungry for a headline, and thought about how the worst day of her life had somehow become the truest one. A 3-year-old girl had walked into a wedding looking for a father she recognized from a photograph, and in doing so, had pulled an entire family out of 3 years of careful, expensive silence. Nobody had planned it. It was simply a child doing what children do, looking for the people they love without any idea of the walls adults build to keep the truth buried. Queens, I want to sit with you in this for one more moment before we go. Amara didn't stay for a ring, and she didn't leave for her pride. She stayed because she made him earn it in the 1 hour that mattered most, when it would have been so much easier to just say, I do, and never ask a single question. So tell me, if you were standing where she was standing, would you have walked out that door, or stayed to make him prove it?